This next 5 minutes will be stuffed full of hope, optimism, and innovation. An amazing story that you'll be talking about during the break. So, David Hertz has been an architect for 35 years. He is a pioneer when it comes to sustainability. He is the founder and president of the Studio of Environmental Architecture. When I asked him, what is your best quality? He didn't even hesitate. He said, integrity. I know you're going to love his flash talk. Hello, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's exciting to be here. I know I cut out the whole part of the lecture about water scarcity. I think I'm preaching in the converted. I started off as an environmentalist. I had to rationalize my place in the world in the built environment and to try to see how we can lessen the impacts of the built environment on the natural. And I've been very interested in what we take, make, and waste. And living in California, there's no way that you could be interested in these things without being conscious of water and our foreign water. And so I started to really look at water on a personal level, fascinated with this substance that comes from outer space that's the same amount that's always been here. And looking at how little fresh water we have gives you a sense of how precious it is. 0.77% of all water on the planet is fresh. Most of it is salt water. So it's fascinating. When you think about the sky, there are actually 6 times more water in vapor in the atmosphere than all the rivers on the planet. And this renews itself on a weekly basis. It is truly a renewable resource. You can't extract too much. Nature abhors a vacuum. So it's incredible the way in which this 37.5 million billion gallons, that's 16 zeros, is at any given time equal to 1 inch of water completely covering the planet. This is abundance, versus scarcity. Perhaps we need to look at our technologies as well. Basically, how this system works in a very simple way is air and moisture in the air is typically taken through a filter like the air we're breathing in this building. It's then a collision of heat and cold, much like a glass of ice in a warm room, that creates condensation. So it's between condensation and evaporation, very simple laws of thermodynamics, but it's done within a vessel. So it's biomimetic in the way that it mimics the hydrological cycle. It makes pure distilled water, so it's potable at its source. It can then be treated, mineralized, but it's a medical grade water. These come in the form of a box, basically. Most of them have used refrigeration techniques. They can be remote. Their limitations have typically been a high appetite for energy, a requirement for a microclimate that's hot and humid, and the use of a refrigerant. And so we sought to change all those things. Typically, if you want more water, like in this case on a building in India, 10 of these 300-gallon-a-day machines are put together so that you have high volume but point of use. And point of use is the thing that I'd really like to stress rather than central infrastructure. We're looking at about $1 trillion of infrastructure rebuild. As we were saying earlier, we don't go into countries that are developing with old technologies, we leapfrog. And the sky is one way to leapfrog it. In Venice, where we live and where my office is, off the Venice boardwalk, in our developed world, we have about 20,000 homeless people. During our sustained drought, but in the heat of a 6-year drought, the city turned off the water to the homeless in Venice. On my small office, I put 11 kilowatts of solar electricity to power an atmospheric water generator, incorporated street art in our alley, and put a bottle filling station in that alley and provide water for free because we believe in the democratization of our common good, not the commodification of it and sold to us in small plastic bottles where there's more plastic than plankton in our oceans. And so how do we localize this source? We are making 150 gallons of water a day. We couldn't give that much away. What an interesting problem in the middle of a drought. So we partnered with a local nonprofit called Community Healing Gardens They have 88 urban farm boxes in the Oakwood section of Venice, which is an underserved community that doesn't have access to food, and then partnered again with a local nonprofit called Safe Place for Youth. They take kids age out of the foster care program and give them jobs. These boxes, which were not being cared for because nobody would attend to them with their own water, with fine, are now watered with atmospheric water using solar energy, used by kids building communities within a gentrified and sometimes stress-filled community because of that tension. So along comes the Water Abundance Xprize. It's a $1.75 million prize to take nascent technologies and to advance it. We had to make 2,000 liters of water in 24 hours out of air. We had to do so at a cost of less than 2 cents per liter, and we had to use 100% renewable energy. There were 98 teams from 27 countries, and we won. We won by being generalists, not specialists. By being an architect, I looked at systems, virtuous cycles of sustainable power, water, food, and job creation together. Those circles basically sourced off of biomass. How do we take and match our waste from the food systems, from the 1.4 million trees that are standing dead in California, or rice husk in India, or corn cobs in Puerto Rico? How do we recycle that both as energy for the volatiles, capture the CO2 in the atmosphere, and create beneficial heat and energy products? And so this concept, this we proved in the Xprize by using biomass gasification to heat up, not burn, but to vaporize those constituent elements. We then create our own atmosphere. So we solve our energy problem. We make 25 kilowatts and the 1/10 the cost of one solar panel, 1/10 the area. But we have tremendous heat. We dry the feedstock, we create an augmented environment. Now we're agnostic as to climate. We've solved that problem. Then we end up condensing that water without refrigerant, and that is the third problem. These energies of biomass go to create power, heat, water, and refrigeration as a byproduct. Now, the process that we end up with is using fuel inputs into waste outputs of local organic systems. This is a carbon negative technology. We need decarbonization if we're going to survive the next decade, 12 years before we hit 2 degrees centigrade. And so this is a carbon negative. We sequester atmospheric CO2, and that is in the form of a useful product, not taking CO2, extracting it, putting it underground, but actually making a beneficial soil nutrient that goes back to pre-Columbian agricultural systems that has a host of well-documented benefits in the soil. We use a local carbon network program to distribute that carbon. Biochar touches all of these areas of our sustainable development goals from the UN. It's quite an amazing part of our agricultural system. Now, we know that we have a crucial nexus. We're short on energy, food, and water systems. What we have been doing with this concept of we do, and we're here today really more in search of answers than offering a solution. But the we do stands for wood to energy deployed emergency water. What if we use intermodal shipping containers that are modular, that deal with these 4 elements: earth, fire, air, and water? What if they can be dropped into communities to provide microgrid, local-based energy solutions, refrigeration solutions, and water solutions? How would that change local economies? How do we do that in a way that is sensitive to local cultures, not imposing our values on it? These ideas are about climate resilience, about self-reliance, and emergency response. We employed one just after testing to power a whole conference at the Oakland Convention Center. We envision these happening here in Watts, in our local community, in our city, where this can serve and educate communities, but also be the core of a resilience hub, where in the event of emergency, one can go for emergency water, emergency power, and emergency refrigeration. And these modules can be used intermodal shipping transport for disaster relief, or perhaps for the small farming that we're discussing, where we can also help to time the delivery of crops, so important to subsistence farming, by providing solar refrigeration. And we're doing so with some interesting technology that, again, is non-refrigerant based. If a farmer can just refrigerate their crop long enough to time the market to be differentiated from the rest of the market, there's a higher yield. And so in these systems are energy, water, cooling, and food production or food storage. And so we're welcome input about these ideas. What are we missing? What are we looking at as we begin this journey to productize it? Ultimately, we're interested in the idea of a distributed, diffused, and democratized energy and water system that we think needs to be antithetical to central, slow-moving infrastructure, and to have the resilience and redundancy and the ability to be deployed rapidly and to swarm to solve a more unpredictable future. So thank you for having me.